Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Get Plugged podcast. I am LaShawn Davis. I am your host this evening for an incredible episode that we are in for a treat about. Tonight, we will be talking about toxic workplaces and the toxic leadership who allows them to thrive. And we all know that toxic workplaces only exist because of toxic leadership. And so tonight, I'm delighted that we will have who I consider to be a subject matter expert in all things toxic workplace, toxic leadership related, Dr. Kevin Sansberry II. He will be with us tonight, and he is an HR professional by trade. He has worked for corporations in HR, but he's a behavioral scientist and an executive coach. And he's inspired to do work that is backed by science and evidence that talks about toxic workplaces and how to eradicate that. How do we get rid of that? How do we get it out of becoming what has somewhat become normal? And I hear this phrase, toxic workplaces and toxic leadership, thrown around like it's nothing to really be concerned about. And it's almost to a sense where we've become desensitized with it. And Kevin is here tonight, and he's going to enlighten us a little bit about not only what he's doing to help spread light and to help put action behind how to overcome and how to combat these things, but also provide guidance and insights on how can we cope, or how do you handle or work through it if you're in a situation right now where you're encountering a toxic leader or a toxic workplace, until you can really get out with an exit strategy. Because we know the great resignation isn't for everybody, and everybody just can't up and quit their jobs, right? Everybody can't just up and quit and just sit back and wait until they find another job. That some people are having to continue to work until they find something better. So how do you cope through that? How do you get through? That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So I'm excited to have him here as a guest. And I want to encourage you, as always, to ask questions. Let us know that you're here. You can leave a comment in the chat, wherever you're watching from, and let us know, that you're here if you have any questions, because again, these platforms are for you. They're about making sure that you have the resources and the tools that you needed to get by how you need to get by at work. And last week we talked about unions, right? We talked about how sometimes a union is not the answer or a solution for every workplace problem that exists. And to really be mindful, if you're deciding or you're on the cusp of deciding whether or not you want to be a part of a union being, coming to your workforce or your work environment to support you, change some of the things that are wrong. And if you recall in that episode, we talked about how unions cannot do anything about toxic leadership or toxic workplaces. It's out of their scope of control. It's out of their bandwidth, it's out of their realm. So I wanted to come back tonight and offer some solutions, some guidance, some advice on ways you can get alleviation or relief if this is what you're experiencing. So tonight, I'm going to introduce Dr. Kevin Sansberry II. He will be out here with us in a moment. But before we do that, I did want to remind you guys of a couple of things. Number one, we are on all audio streaming avenues that the podcast is aired on. So make sure that you go ahead and you subscribe to not only this YouTube channel if you're watching us on YouTube, but go to the Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast episodes. Be sure to go there. And our guest tonight also has a podcast called Toxic Leadership, Tales of Transformation. So I want to encourage you guys to go subscribe to his podcast as well. And that way you can listen and learn a little bit more about what we'll be talking about tonight. But definitely want to encourage you guys who might miss us when we're live on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Other avenues to listen to us if you're exercising, on your way to work, on a break from work, or you just wanting to listen to us, however you listen to us, be sure to do that because we're out there as well. So I'm also going to now bring Dr. Kevin Sansberry out, and we're going to begin talking about toxic workplace culture. So Dr. Kevin, how are you? And welcome to the show.
Hello. I'm great. How are you today?
Listen, I'm excited. I'm excited that you're here. I'm always excited every time I talk to you because of the work that you do, right? And it's just so valuable and so important, but valuable to not just employees who work in the workplace, but also what I love about what you do, especially your podcast, is you help leaders understand their deficiencies. And I remember vividly you did an episode about a leader who didn't even recognize he was a toxic leader until he listened to your podcast to understand what
Hmm.
toxic leadership traits were and what toxic leaders do. And so I just want to, number one, thank you for being here. Thank you for finding time out of your busy schedule with all the things that you have going on to talk to us about this very topic and help shed some light, especially with the scientific evidence, right? That you
Yeah,
are very keen to know when it relates to toxic leadership. So thank you for being here.
I appreciate you. Thank you. And I love the work that you do. And I'm glad we're able to connect and cross paths.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yep.
So, to jump us off first, I want to talk about toxic leadership, your
Hmm.
podcast. What got you started and got you interested in this type of work?
Yeah. So, how can I put this? I originally wanted to study serial killers. That's actually what I was originally going to school for when I was getting my bachelor's degree. And I pivoted into actually the same behavioral traits, but rather looking at these behavioral traits in the business world. So I look at things like narcissism, CEO narcissism is a study I did with a few other researchers. I've also looked at like corporate psychopathy, Machiavellianism, um, workplace bullying. Did some research there too, and a lot of the traits that basically are deemed aberrant or negative and have negative impact on people. Because that's kind of the first thing you will see. And then second, you'll see a negative impact on the organization. But unfortunately, toxicity has been normalized as like strength sometimes in workplace
Mm-hmm.
settings. And so I started the podcast because I only have a 24 hours in a day just like anybody else, and I wanted to be able to like scale my voice and be able to be in people's ears, and being able to be a support function virtually and asynchronously. So the podcast has been very helpful in that way. We got to number 4 on Apple iTunes last
Wow.
April. Actually, April 12th is when we started, so almost a little over a year ago. But we got to number 4 in the United States. We got to number 1 in Philippines, and then now we're ranked in various countries around the world. And that just showed me how important this topic was, because I'm not a fan of putting my head in the sand and trying to be like the toxic positivity person. I,
Right,
I,
right.
I like to speak elephants in the room and like to speak truth to power, because those who are most oppressed in the workplace don't necessarily have the voice to do so.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, why we get along so well because the people give it, I mean, that's the reason I started the HR plug, right? To give the
Yep.
people the voice and the knowledge and the access to how to control their workplace situation. So, my first question, and I think it's important, especially I know you're going to say this as a researcher, but how do I know, or what is the definition if I am in a toxic work environment or if I'm working with a toxic leader? How will I know that?
Mm. So there are a lot of I'll say kind of lists on the internet that tells people, gives people ideas, right? Um, One of the things I want to say is, if you basically how to categorize all of those are these are basically behaviors that take advantage or abuse that leader and direct report relationship. So it's abuse of power. Um, Toxic behavior can be overt behaviors like you see individuals who are yelling, you see that kind of behavior. You see, overutilization of anger as a tactic for motivation. But then it could also be behaviors that may not seem toxic, quote unquote, but they're still causing harm or undue stress for the people in the direct report line. And it can be things like micromanaging behavior. And that's that sometimes some leaders are doing it for a good reason, but like the behavior in itself, there's also behavior that is like passive aggressive that are deemed toxic, like leaving people off emails, or
Mm,
someone says something they disagree with, and they disagree with you in a meeting as the boss, and all of a sudden the boss is like leaving them off of projects, or that passive aggressive type behavior too. And so the way to think about it holistically is that behavior that causes destruction in the supervisor employee relationship are typically those behaviors you'll see deemed as toxic. But
Mm.
the word toxic leader and toxic leadership in itself is connected to numerous dysfunctional styles. So it's connected to like, that micromanaging piece that I talked about. It's connected to like, you know, uh, a leader who has anger issues or lack emotional intelligence. There's puppeting behavior. There's a lot of dysfunctional leadership styles, and toxic leadership is an umbrella term.
Right. Okay. I like how
Mm-hmm.
you put it. It's that distinction that is it looks so you need to look at the relationship between you as the employee and you as that leader figure. And is that relationship destructive, or is it causing you, is the conduct or behavior, right? What you should be looking at, how is it making you feel? And is it impacting your
Mm-hmm.
ability to do your job safely or in a way that's healthy for you, right? And I think that's
Right.
important. I think that's important because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people minimize and begin to normalize, those things. Because you mentioned that earlier. You said we start to normalize. What does that look like when we start normalizing this?
We praise leadership behaviors and mentalities that are not productive to like organizational success. So, for example, in a lot of workplaces, there's individuals who are very like tough and all that kind of stuff. A lot of people look up to those kind of leaders and as like
Mm,
that's the strong leader. But then I can go far with that because that behavior in itself is not even equitable because women can't do that. People of
mm,
color can't really do that. So
mm-hmm.
so it's not even
Come
an
on.
equitable thing. Yeah. So when we think about like that archetype of like that strong leader, we tend to think about like very hard nosed, very hard behaviors, like an extreme results orientation. But the problem is a lot of leaders who get into these leadership positions forget that one of the biggest results you have is the impact on people and your people. That's
Yes.
like the whole point of having a leader.
Right.
Right? If I wanted somebody to hold me accountable to like tasks, why couldn't my leader just be the AI? Like that's
Right.
robotic stuff. You could like a computer can tell me if I did a job or not. But I need a leader that's going to be inspirational. I need a leader that's going to have me want to strive for more. And that's what you see the difference between those leaders who are toxic, which cause destruction in their wake, and leaders who are transformative, which construct. And so it's constructive
Mm.
behaviors versus destructive behaviors.
Wow, constructive versus destructive. That's an excellent way to look at it because as you were talking and I'm thinking, wow, like yeah, that you hear the terminology people over profit all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And you
Mm-hmm.
see these leaders praised because they can get results or because they close a big deal. And then it's ignored the fact that you just disrespected everybody on your team just to close this big deal. And then that's the leader that you see get promoted because they closed a big deal. Never mind how you insulted, micromanaged, yelled at, the behaviors that you exhibited toward people to get there. So now I get
Yeah.
it. It's
Yeah. One of those
normalized.
it is, and the ironic thing about it is it's really the people are a part of the profit. And so if we were thinking about people and lifting up the value of relationships and people in the machine we call work, you
Mm-hmm.
would actually be profitable. It's just we're very short term oriented. And so a lot of people don't want to put in the work to make those relationship deposits. And then we expect people to go above and beyond. Where nah, if there's a certain work environment you're in, you probably set up a ceiling for how far you're going to go, how hard you're going to work. There's probably a limit. And that limit is there because, we don't want to be taken advantage of or whatever that trauma one has.
Yes. Great. So now we have an understanding fully of what it is and how it's been normalized, right? And so, what do I do now if I'm in it? Like, if I am in a toxic relationship at work with my supervisor that's more destructive than constructive,
Yeah.
what are some things that I could do at least in the meantime until I can exit?
Yeah. Well, first off, the one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they trick themselves mentally. They gaslight themselves and say, you know what, this is just a bad phase. They had a bad day. They were stressed out. We do this thing, and I'm not saying don't give people the benefit of the doubt, but if something's a pattern of behavior, ultimately you can end up gaslighting yourself and staying in a situation where you probably should have left a long time ago. First off. Second, there are a multitude of things that people can do, and I'll explain just the coping mechanisms real quick. So there are people who there's adaptive coping mechanisms, assertive coping mechanisms, and avoidance coping mechanisms to deal with these toxic bosses and toxic leaders. And this also applies to any kind of destructive behavior, to be honest. And so the examples I'll use there are like those assertive, I'll start with the easiest one to explain. Assertive coping mechanisms are basically, I'm going to directly confront the aggressor. I'm going to directly confront the problem, whatever that might be. And I'm going to be assertive. Not a lot of people feel empowered to do so, but that is an option. That could also mean I'm going to go directly to HR. I'm going to go directly to whatever support mechanisms I have in my workplace, right? Then you have avoidance. Avoidance, I'll explain, is basically what it sounds like. I'm going to do, and you see avoidance a lot in workplaces where we work around the person. We send emails around that person. We schedule whole meetings to talk about the toxic leader and how to make the meeting run smoothly, how to mitigate them, and we avoid those conversations, And so that's a way to do it. Sometimes people have reported in the Great Resignation. There's been a lot of reports of how the remote work situation has assisted some people in like buffering that toxicity because they're able to avoid some of it. So like after the meeting, I don't have to see the person again. I can just turn Zoom off. And so I've coached some folks who are dealing with that right now. The last mechanism for coping is adaptive, and some adaptive shifts look at how can I shift how I show up so that I'm not negatively impacted. How can I reframe? And so one of the things I talked about in my live today was the fact of like some people in a workplace bullying situation actually get harmed more than others. And one of those archetypes that I talked about was individuals who are maybe perfectionistic and they tend to overwork, right? And so it's like, well, yeah, let me work on myself and decenter or decouple my self-worth to my job. And that's hard for a lot of people in the 9 to 5 grind because some people,
Yes.
who you are is what you do in a way. And so an adaptive technique to buffer against toxicity is, you know what, this is just a job. That's an adaptive technique. Getting into
Mm-hmm.
that mindset, this is just a job, and I'm going to do the best that I can, and I'm going to block off that negative self-esteem that typically occurs when somebody's not happy with you at work. And that's an adaptive technique.
Yes. I mean, you just said a whole lot. So we talked about assertive, right? Takes a lot of
Mm-hmm.
courage to be assertive. And a lot of people, from my experience, are fearful of assertive because then they think they'll
Yeah.
be retaliated against or they're going to fire me. Now I'm
Sure.
going to be the target, right? However, I would encourage anybody watching this, if you're in a toxic work environment and you do want to say something or do something, look in your organization and see what type of anonymous channels exist, because not every way to be assertive requires you to give your identity. And there's a lot of companies that may have like a third party system where you call a 1-800 number or you can submit some kind of way and not give your name or identifying information. If you want to do something like this, I would encourage you to be as detailed and as specific as possible, because when you're vague, nothing can really happen or no action can be taken. But if you don't want to say your name and you say something like, I work in, this department, and keep it very general as far as the members of this team feel da 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 da, and here are some examples of when this leader has exhibited these behaviors on these dates and these times, and here's who was present if you want to ask any of these people. You want to be specific, and that will help you be assertive without necessarily risking your reputation or your job, because I'm not going to be one of those people who tell you, oh, retaliation doesn't happen. Oh, it happens
Right.
overtly. You know what I mean? No one's going to be overt, I'm sorry, no one's going to be overtly with it and be like, oh, I'm going to retaliate against you because I know you called it. No one's going to do that. But then all
Yeah.
of a sudden you're not picked for this project, or all of a sudden your schedule changes and now you have to work. Like things start happening that you can't prove or tie to that thing. So I would encourage you, look at what anonymous mechanisms exist in your employer that you're able to, as detailed as possible, share information that is destructing your relationship, your workplace experience, or what have you. And then avoidance, right, is also something that people do. And something that you mentioned is like, they try to work around this person, and that takes a lot of energy sometimes.
It
Trying to
does.
find, I
It
can't
does.
even do my job the right way because now I got to coddle this grown person who just don't know how to treat me, and I don't want to get into it with them, so I'm going to work around them. And that is a coping mechanism, but it's also one that's hard, and it's also one that can lead to other factors that are lasting impressions of toxic workplaces like PTSD, or
Yeah. Can I make a comment about that?
yes, please.
So here's the ironic thing about that.
Mm-hmm.
So we set up all these channels and processes to avoid the toxic leader, and sometimes we end up doing toxic things ourselves,
Right.
and we perpetuate it sometimes. And so one of the things I want to say about that is it is all of our job to cultivate and perpetuate a positive organizational culture. But I want to be very clear when I talk about employee coping. I'm there is coping mechanisms, but the burden of change is on the organization,
Correct.
and the burden for change is the organization itself. And so there are a whole host of things. I talked about 7 things today in my live. It's on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram, and all that. But like 7 things that organizations can do about
Mm.
the toxic leader on that end, because people there's one thing about us coping and us doing that, but like we're dealing with enough as employees. There's enough stress going on, and working with toxic leaders and toxic leadership behavior that exacerbates an already stressful workplace in the first place.
Correct.
So,
You're
mhm.
absolutely right. And I love how you put that. It is the obligation of the business to make sure that you're working in an environment that's conducive for, you not having to endure these types of behaviors. And we're going to talk about how our government has no laws about, any of this
Yeah,
in a minute, because, that's my pet peeve. But, I just want people to understand, like you said, it's not your burden to fix, right? It's not your responsibility. Now you got to go fix this person, because likely you're not able to fix these people, but
mm-hmm.
understand it is their obligation. And then the third thing you mentioned was adaptive, and that also takes a lot of work,
It
and,
does.
and, and a lot of energy to deal with. Um,
Yeah.
and the one caution I would say is, don't allow having a bad leader or working with a bad leader make you believe there's something wrong with you, that you got
Mm.
to change you and who you are because of how you feel. Because I personally have gone through that before. Like, why is it that every time I encounter or deal with this person, he feels the need to belittle me, or she feels the need to dismiss how I feel in my perspective? Am I doing something wrong? Or what can I change about me to make this person respect me differently? And I've learned, Dr. K, it's not me sometimes,
Right.
you know?
Right. And unfortunately, some of those our reaction, our cognitive reactions and responses to like that behavior, some of that stuff is unavoidable.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, people leave a toxic workplace and maybe end up in a way better one, but the damage is already done.
Yeah.
And they're now carrying around a bunch of that trauma and the baggage from the
Yes.
previous leader.
Yep. So we do have a comment that I just want to mention. So we have someone watching on LinkedIn says, "Man, I've totally had the destructive behavior. Shaking my head. I've learned to do differently because of it." And listen, that right there is like one of the best results, right? Of that
Yeah.
self-awareness to be accountable in your behaviors. And then patterns don't lie, and correct. If you look at, as a leader especially, or even if you're assessing a leader, what's continually happening or what's keep on happening, even if you hear it from different people or different perspectives, it's a pattern. There's some truth
Yeah.
in there somewhere, right? And
Mm-hmm.
JP is watching. Thank you. Happy to catch that. Happy you were able to catch us live here as well. And thank you for joining. But you know, um, when you think about toxic work environments and toxic, leaders and things, how is there a way for me to guard myself here or set some boundaries here, or like what's my tolerance level that I'm able to define, and how do I execute that in a way that's professional and still
Mhm.
positive?
Yeah. I mean, as it relates to boundaries that need to be set, some of the things, the avenues we need to think about are I need to set boundaries related to how much am I going to allow my external environment to impact my internal environment? What is the boundary there? And that's step one. Because a lot of times we go into these situations where our external environment and whatever's happening outside of us is us. And that defines what life is for us, and we lose that internal world that we all walk around with, and we allow people's perceptions of us or people's opinions of us to be reality when and not always, that's not always reality. And so that'll help combat that self-worth piece that you talked about, that self-esteem piece that you talked about. I then would travel and go to what are the boundaries we set with our time. And what that means is how am I being able to set boundaries as relates to like when I work, and am I going to wake up from on my weekend and scramble to some email or not? Like, or am I going to set boundaries, right?
Oh
Like those are,
man, especially with hybrid, right? You talked
yeah,
about remote and hybrid. Like I saw, can people who feel like I never leave work now because I work remotely and my laptop's at home, and my leader has this expectation that when they email me I respond because it's on my phone. Or but you're right, set boundaries with your time helps to control the level
hmm.
of impact that person can have on you. So that's so true, so
I'm
very true.
going to say one more boundary.
Hmm.
One more boundary to think about is I'm going to set boundaries with what I do, because there's, job descriptions have that duties as assigned section. But there are some situations where you're literally operating out of scope. You are not doing your job. You have a toxic leader who maybe doesn't want to do their job or puts things onto you that aren't a part of your role. That needs to be an open and honest conversation about open and honest conversation, because there's no amount of like meditation you can do if you're working overworking as a norm. Like meditation works, but you got to work too. You can't just keep putting yourself in these situations, and you,
Uh-huh.
you have to be able to set those boundaries, because all the self-care strategies that exist, you will just find yourself in a depressed state taking a lot of naps and
Mm,
calling that self-care, when in reality you
mm,
might have a little depressive symptoms or something like that. So
very true. And I want to touch on something you mentioned earlier briefly. You talked about workplace bullying, and
yeah.
I want to mention too that sometimes toxic workplaces don't exist because of immediate or direct behaviors from the leaders, but also what they allow, right?
Yeah,
And workplace bullying sometimes can be what, peer to peer, or leader to person. So
customers. Yeah.
customers, vendors, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said earlier, it's the organization's obligation to ensure that you're not enduring this. But can you talk about workplace bullying a little bit, and is it the same thing, or is there a difference with how I
Mm-hmm.
respond in those situations?
So how one responds could be different simply because workplace bullying typically has a target. Um, with toxic leadership behavior, sometimes that's just equal opportunity, and that's just how that person is to everybody. The workplace bullying piece comes up where it could be targeted, and the impact on people is pretty similar because, like I said, the toxic leadership is kind of an umbrella term. But you also have another frame of workplace bullying called mobbing, and what that is when groups bully individuals or other groups and things like that, and that happens in the workplace too. And so it gets really, you can, I mean, so when we think about the word toxic, um, you know, think about that as like poison. That's kind of where that word from the etymology it comes from. And what that basically means is you look at it as it spreads, something that spreads, and that's destructive and that's detrimental to whatever that ecosystem is, whether it's the body or whether it's your organizational body. And so that poison, that toxicity can come from a leader, and that toxicity can also come from groups as well. And that's the difference between like bullying and mobbing.
Hmm. Thank you for that breakdown, because I want people to really be informed using the right terminology for the right type of situation. And you talk about poison and toxicity, and things like that in the workplace. But Kevin, I want to take some time because you are a man of not just words, but there's also action and a lot of things that you're doing to educate in this space and execute in this space outside of your podcast, which we know that's why you started, but outside of those things, can you share with us a little bit about your latest project that you're working on?
Yeah, so just got done and wrapping up the first certification called the Organizational Detox Certification. This is the first certification that
Ooh.
looks at how can I, which is the I is anyone, HR, I'm an employee on the floor, whatever that means, how can I begin the process of detoxifying my organizational culture? And it goes from mindsets to behaviors to systems. And when you think about the word detox, if you break that down and you look at the Latin root of like de or d, that means to come down from.
Mm.
And when you look up the word tox, that toxin, that's that poison. And so this certification helps people move away from or come down from the poison that exists.
Mm.
And we stop the spread. And so it'll work. It's 50 hours of certification content, and it goes through not only individuals looking at who they are, and like I said, people walk around with baggage. And so I'm going to be honest, there are people who have taken the certification who might have some biases and baggages that they built based on their previous experiences that they have to unlearn. Because in order to learn something, you have to unlearn. In order to center something, you have to decenter something else. And so
Mm.
the first part of the certification process helps people decenter some of these toxic norms that we view as work. And then we jump into behavior, where I teach individuals how to shape behavior change. And what that means is, how are we shaping behavior change? Not forcing. We're using nudges. We're using nudges that's based all in behavior science research. And then lastly, I will walk people through the very methods that I use systemically to make movement from point A to point B in organizations around the world.
Wow. Man, detox your like I'm stuck on this word detox because if you think about detox, right? And
Yeah.
people who decide they need detox, it's deep. Like they have to disconnect themselves from everything familiar to truly be intentional about
Mm-hmm.
change.
Mm-hmm.
Changing whatever that is, their habits, their intakes, or what have you, change so that they can be flushed out and cleansed to start anew. And you're telling me
Yeah.
this is a certification that I can learn
To
how
do
to
that.
do for an
Yeah.
organization.
And the power, like if we think about that, that analogy of detoxing and cleansing,
Yes.
your liver detoxes your body already, but something must be so poisonous that you need something else,
Right. Right.
right?
So like look,
You
the
need,
liver is like HR, okay?
yeah,
Like
right, exactly. The
we
liver is
supposed to
HR.
be
Yeah,
it's the gatekeepers of
yeah,
culture here, right?
yeah.
Some ain't working because HR is not
It's not
effective
working.
enough to stop
Yeah,
the danger to the point of destruction.
yeah. And I need that extra assistance that might be another resource, or I need something external to help me with my destructive behaviors that's causing my liver to work in overdrive, or that's shutting down my
Mm,
liver. That's what
man.
detox will be, and that's what it does. And so yeah, this program has been built with HR people in mind. It's been built with HR people. It's been built with consultants. And it's also been built with a host of employees as well who have been
Wow.
been in these situations. And so using those focus groups to build this hand in hand created 50 hours of awesome content for someone to like be confident to begin that detox process in their organizational culture.
Wow, I love it. And that's what I mean, you guys, by action behind just the words and just what you're doing. Someone said, I have been detoxing from my last experience. Look, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And these are the effects of that, right? These are the effects because what happens if your liver gets too badly damaged and you need a liver transplant, right? You need to
Right.
remove it altogether because it isn't working right. But if your body, the body of the organization or what have you, doesn't learn to take care of the internal organs so that they all function properly, eventually it will be destructive, and so will your organization.
And the point about that is, you can't just keep detoxing. You also have to heal.
Mm.
And so the process in which this certification course goes through, it's all rooted in social justice. Because if you do, like, one thing I'm gonna just say out loud is, like, if you look at the research of, like, workplace bullying, for example,
Hmm.
women are impacted at a higher rate and impacted at a different rate. And then there's also a racialized impact to a lot of this work too. And so it's important to call out that those who are most oppressed in organizational systems actually are more harmed in organizational systems related to this toxicity. And so at the same time of us detoxing, you can't just detox and keep the same mindsets. You can't just
Mm.
detox and continue the same behavior. When we talk about systemic change, the actors in the system have to change along with the system.
Right. Very true. It's almost like if you are trying to detox from alcohol, you can't now go back
Mm-hmm.
and hang out at the liquor store. You know,
Or be a social drinker. Yeah,
or be right, or
you
just
shouldn't be at least.
go to
Yeah.
happy hour. You really got to, like you said,
Yep.
change your behaviors. And I like that your culture detox isn't just for HR, because
Mm-hmm.
it's everybody's responsibility to lead healthy work environments and understand how to rid of toxic work environments, right? Although the
Yeah.
leaders are the ones who allow behaviors or fail to take action, which allows the behavior to permeate and
Mm-hmm.
exist, it's still, if people don't report it, how will they know? If
Right.
there's no avenues or channels to report it, how, so it's everybody's responsibility. And so I love the fact that culture, the detox certification is available, and not just for HR, but for everyone. And so if I
Correct.
want to know more about this certification program and taking part of this, where could I go? And I want to know for me too, because I'm doing this. I just want you to know.
Yeah. So I'm gonna do two websites real quick. The easiest
Okay.
one is culturedetox.online.
Okay.
And on that website, individuals can go and learn more about the program. And I have avenues there, buttons and stuff people can click on and get a consultation with me, meet with me, and let me, get to know folks. And then if individuals want to just sign up and register for the course itself, and we can put that in the notes, but it's kevra.thinkific.com, and it's
Okay.
hosted on the Thinkific platform.
Okay.
And so kevra.thinkific.com is the course website directly.
Okay.
And you can reach both of those websites on the first one I listed out, culturedetox.online.
We will definitely add this to the notes so that people
Yeah.
who might be watching the replay can definitely um, check this out. So you said it's available. So this means that there is a way for me to control the pace. I don't have to sit through
Yeah.
all 50 hours being a lecture. Okay.
Yes, yes, and they're all, yes, 50 hours, long time, but it's very fruitful because it is self-paced, and so that the website where you can just go register right now, one can begin tonight if they wanted to on the
Mm,
program, and I have an introductory pricing on there because the price will increase based on the value of the course, but
okay.
the introductory price is $97, and so it's
What?
going to start off. Yeah, I'm starting off low, right? Yeah. And
If
so
y'all don't go get this course, I
it
was
is
thinking,
it's there. Yeah, no, that's a steal. I'm gonna tell you for what it is, that is a steal. But I really wanted to get it out there for people who needed it, and so yeah, introductory.
listen, we about to plug this everywhere. So, I'm gonna be plugging this everywhere. $97 is an absolute steal to walk away with a full fledged certification, and make, like, I'm doing this tonight, and I'm probably gonna gift some people to do it as well. So if you want the certification, and you maybe don't have the $97 to get it, if you contact us, we will sponsor you to get this certification if that's something that you are interested in. If you get to us by today, April the 13th, and to support Dr. Kevin and what he's doing, we're definitely going to support this. So we will do this for 5 people. So the first 5 people who come, we will enroll them and sponsor them to take this course.
And you're
Ex-
you're an HR leader, and you know how much
yes.
certifications cost, and
Oh,
so
listen, that's why
yeah,
I'm jumping on this now. That's
I
why
wanted
I'm
to
jumping
be
on
I
this
wanted to
now.
be like my whole approach to work. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to be able to do what I love and be able to do what I've studied and got a doctorate in and be able to help people every single day of my life now. And so I'm not motivated by money. I'm motivated by my mission and to make the workplace better. And so I wanted to create equitable pricing as I start off, because for those who really need it, should be the first in line. And so this introductory price won't last, but it's $97. So
Yes. And
for
I
now.
listen, thank you. Thank you for that, because that truly shows heart. That truly shows heart, compassion, and a person that wants to drive change. Because listen, greed has become a culprit in even why people experience these toxic workplace environments, like we talked about earlier, profit over
Yeah.
people and things like that. But the fact that you're offering this and the certification and you're doing it for $97, like, is beyond incredibly amazing. So thank you for your being a gift and offering this gift for us. And again, that is culturedetox.online. If you have questions about it, you can go and book a consultation with Dr. Kevin, and he will talk you through the program. But if you want to go right to it, you can go to Kevra, KEVRA.thinkific.com, and be able to go ahead and sign up for this course, because I cannot stress. I don't generally, I don't sponsor stuff like this. I won't. You'll never really hear me on a podcast pushing something that somebody else is selling, that because I don't know or I don't believe in it. But Dr. Kevin is somebody that I do believe in, and I know the work that he does is pristine, and I know that the work that he does comes with so much heart. And this is definitely something that the HR Plug would co-sign on and is going to do myself. And I was talking to him earlier about the Unplugged conference. And, it was a phenomenal event. And Dr. Kevin was a sponsor for that as well. And in an upcoming Unplugged conference, we're going to also see about getting this program out to those participants as well, because this is something that's necessary, and it can place undue hardship on you when you're trying to figure out how to do something that you're not qualified or trained to do. This gives you that
Mhm.
training and that lens on how to do that. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have someone that's saying thank you. Listen, I'm not the only one grateful here. Thank you, says Renetta. Thank you so much. And then we have somebody saying, let's talk education environments.
Oh,
I love
oh,
this
yeah.
segment.
I spent 10 years in education. Um, we could talk all day about education environments. Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
and I'm assuming so. So it's interesting. Not sure if this user, meant like education as far as like
K-12,
teachers, K
higher
through,
ed.
right, like
Yeah,
what it was. But
yeah.
not too long ago, we had somebody on here that was a teacher talking
Hmm.
about toxic work environments. And then I met a principal who talked about toxic work environments. And I was so surprised to know this happens in education. I thought it was just corporate.
No, 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 no. It actually happens. Like I'm. This is anecdotally, but I see a lot more of those behaviors in the nonprofit space or in that education space
Wow.
where profits aren't the main thing. Because at least in like corporations, some people can gas themselves and explain away like, okay, they just want to make the sale. We got to make the sale, so that's why I worked hard on the weekend, whatever.
Hmm.
But like in these nonprofit environments, you actually get the same behaviors, and people work in being teachers and nonprofit workers because they have a passion for the mission, but
Mm.
yet you're still faced with the same toxicity that a corporation would have, and so it hurts a little differently, I guess I will say. And I did a few episodes on the Toxic Leadership podcast about we dove into like the nonprofit industry a little bit, and
Mm.
we talked about the racialized impact of having a black woman a leader who didn't have the same power as even people that reported to her based on her racialized
Wow.
experience, which was interesting. And so, yeah, yeah, different industries have different manifestations of toxicity.
Wow.
And I'll share one more thing when we talk about industries. One of the things I'm doing with the Toxic Leadership podcast right now is industry deep dives. And so currently I'm doing on TikTok Live with the legal industry. But I've
Mm.
already got signed up, and it's going to be on a podcast too. I'm going to post those on there. But we already have the restaurant industry on deck. I got law enforcement. I got like creative architecture firms, things like that. And then I have healthcare. And so we're going to be doing all of it. And I got somebody that wants to
Mm.
nonprofit. So we're actually going to be looking at the unique toxicity by industry now and provide specific bespoke solutions for them.
Man, that and it's funny because when you work in corporate America, you believe toxic, work environments exist because of the pressure for greed or the pressure for money and things like that. And let me see here. Oh, it's Dr. Jerry. Hi, Dr. Jerry. She's the principal that I was talking about. She just wrote a book called Chronicles of a principal in urban schools or something like that. Sorry about the title because I'm going off the
Mm,
top of my head, but I was just talking to her the other day about the toxicity that happens in the educational realm. So the fact that you're now taking it a step deeper, and not just telling me yes, toxic workplaces exist, but here's how it exists in your industry, and here's how, man, that just takes it even a step further to eradicating it. So you might have to come back because I'm curious now of how these play out in different industries. I think about law, like you said, law enforcement, and you said legal, like legal,
yeah,
like they know
yeah,
the law, they know
lawyers.
employment law. So you
Well,
would think,
and they also have an increased suicide rates, and so
yes,
there are different facets of toxicity, and there are different impacts on the people in these industries too. And
mm,
then if you look at like the restaurant industry, there's increase in like something called work family conflict. And so what that means is people in those industries tend to have a lot more trouble at home that's induced by their workplace and some of that pressure and
mm.
stress. Think long hours, think late nights and alcohol usage, all that kind of stuff. And so you see differences based on industry, and it's just, yeah, and it's really just something I was interested in, as a researcher, but also what I can do to support these industries too.
Wow, that is so insightful. It is so insightful because there's such a connection. Like work is no more where you just go to get your paycheck and go home. It connects to so many other facets of your life that all tie
Hmm.
to your mental health, your self-esteem, your family life, like all of that is
All of that.
connected. Wow, so
Yeah.
this was great. Dr. Jerry, if you're still watching, go ahead and drop in the comments the title of your book so I can get it correctly because I do not want to steer people the wrong way. But great call out about toxic work environments being in the educational realm. And I would invite anyone, if you do work in an industry that has toxic traits, or you're experiencing toxic things, reach out and let us know so that I can get with Dr. Kevin and let him know so that we can make sure that we included in this, what I'm calling anthology or whatever you want to call it, because
Yeah.
I love that. And somebody said I got education because I love that because we need to bring awareness. We need to bring awareness to
Hmm.
this, and we
Hmm.
need to have leaders be held accountable, organizations be held accountable to how they're treating the people that help them get results. And when I think about nonprofits, education, these are all people who lead with compassion and hearts. That's why they do what they do.
Hmm.
So we just got to be mindful about how we're treating them in their workplace. But listen, how can people contact you outside of this certification that I'm gonna plug one more time? Y'all go to get this culture detox online certification. It is $97. You cannot
Be part of the
there's
first
nowhere
tranche.
else you can get a
Yeah, no,
certification
you're not gonna find it.
with that's gonna be this good because I know the man behind it for $97. That's all I'm gonna say. So
Mm, mm, hmm.
how else
So
can they connect with you?
absolutely. So toxicleadershippodcast.com is the, kind of the hub. And on there, you'll not only see the different episodes and hear about the podcast, there's also blogs, and you can do searches and like type in like bullying and find blogs on that. You can type in like media and find things that's happening in the news like about toxic leadership. So there's all kinds of stuff you can find on the website. On that website, you can see all my socials related to how to reach me and stuff like that. And then people can reach out to me directly on askdrkev.com, and you can leave me a voicemail, and I will respond back to you. I used to say 24 hours, but I can't make those kind of promises. But I will respond back. So if anybody ever runs into any issues, have questions, askdrkev.com is active and ready for people to reach out. So
Well, thank you so much. Hi, Angela. How are you? Thank you for joining. She's giving us a thumbs up. And listen, this was a great episode. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed this topic. I thoroughly enjoyed your knowledge and your expertise, and you dropping all the jewels that you dropped tonight. Because people need this. And
yeah,
people need the awareness and the access, like we talked about earlier. So I appreciate you. We appreciate you. I'm gonna ask you to go backstage for a moment while I close out the show. And but again, thank you for joining us, and I'll be right with you. Okay.
yep. See ya.
All right. So listen, everyone. This was such an incredible, amazing show because it's riddled with things that can help you understand how to navigate through a toxic workplace environment if that's what you're encountering, if that's what you're dealing with. And it also tells organizations and leaders that you have a responsibility and an obligation to make sure that the people that you're depending on to get your organization's mission afloat, to reach the customers, to reach the clients, to reach whoever your target audience is, the people that are a part of your team or your organization that represent you deserve to be respected, deserve to be valued, and deserve to be treated well. And if they're in environments that are counteractive to that, please take the time to get educated and understand what you can do to fulfill your obligation to make sure that this doesn't happen. And before I close out, I do want to give a shout out to the author, Dr. Jerry. She is the author of a book called Chronicles of an Urban School Principal, and it's on Amazon. And I'm going to have her actually on this podcast as well to talk about her experiences as a principal in an urban school area and what she encountered that created toxic environments for her and what she learned from that and how to get out. So she'll be on this episode, on this podcast. And Dr. Jerry, thank you for tuning in and sharing that and bringing up the different industries that encounter toxic work environments. So if you guys enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and be sure to tune in next Wednesday at 8 p.m. where we will be live again for another episode of Let's Get Plugged. And wherever you're watching, if you know anybody that is in or listening, if you know anybody that is being subjected to this type of environment or could really use this information, make sure you share this with them or a friend, because what we're trying to do is spread the word, provide the knowledge and the access so that people can lead and live healthy lives that allow them to thrive in the workplace. So thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, enjoy yourselves and your evening.